Hello, everyone. I'm Carrie Coogan, Deputy Director of the Kansas City Public Library, and welcome to our library signature programming. If this is your first time here, welcome, and we invite you to visit kclibrary.org, where you can see other events that are coming up, and you can also see our event archive for events that we've had over the past couple of years. Today, we're so pleased to bring you the first of a three-part series about local, homegrown, entrepreneurial restaurants in our metro area. The toll of the COVID-19 pandemic extends all too sadly to some of Kansas City's most adored restaurants, from burger joints to fine food establishments, which permanently closed their doors over the past 10 months amid emptied tables and bars and devastated bottom lines. The local dining industry is suffering, to be sure, but there are some bright spots. Many places have managed to hang on, if barely. New ones are opening up. KC Restaurant Week arrives, as usual this month, a January routine offering the definition of comfort food in uncomfortable times. With it comes an opportunity to take stock of the city's dining scene, really the new dining scene. In a three-part lunchtime series coinciding with Restaurant Week, restaurant critic Liz Cook of The Pitch visits with restaurateurs and industry workers across the spectrum this week to assess what has been lost, how surviving kitchens are adapting today, and what the future might hold. We will also be taking your questions and answer them in the last 15 minutes of the program, so please feel free to join in the conversation. And now, I'd like to introduce our guest for today, Kyo Yamanaka of the now closed Gojo Japanese Steakhouse, a Kansas City staple many of you know and ate at for 42 years, and Chrissy Newcomb, owner of the Filipino-flavored KC Pinoy, who closed her physical location in September, but she's got some new news to report. And finally, to moderate today our series in all this week, both today and Wednesday at noon and Friday at noon, Liz Cook, writer for Pitch Magazine here in Kansas City, Missouri. Welcome to all of you, and take it away, Liz.
All right, thanks so much, Carrie. I guess I would just emphasize what you already said. If you have any questions that come up during the panel, drop them in the comment section on YouTube as you think of them, and we'll try to get to as many as possible at the end. Carrie did a great job of setting the scene there for what the industry looks like. One thing I wanted to emphasize, though, before we get started is just how going into this year, the restaurant industry really seemed healthier than ever. And overnight, it seemed everything kind of screeched to a halt. So one thing that really illustrated to me just how quickly the landscape shifted is that the National Restaurant Association put out a report on March 11th that predicted a 4% increase in sales in 2020 from the previous year. And then, of course, that rosy report came out 2 days before Mayor Quinton Lucas declared a state of emergency in Kansas City to halt the spread of COVID-19. And the rest is pretty well known of where things went from there. Almost 1 in 6 restaurants nationwide has closed, either permanently or long-term, and hundreds of thousands of bar and restaurant workers have lost their jobs. So I'm especially grateful to have Chrissy and Kyo here to help us put those losses into a local context and make sense of what we've lost and where we might be able to go from here. So Kyo, I want to start with you first. Gojo's feels pretty unique among KC restaurants just in its longevity, and that it had been open continuously at 41st and Broadway since, I think, 1978. That's a longer run than most restaurants have. And that also means, if I'm doing my math correctly, that it opened before you were born.
Definitely, yes.
So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the restaurant meant to your family and what it was like to grow up alongside it.
Wow. Well, I mean, the restaurant, obviously has been there since before I've been born. My dad moved from Japan in 1978 to open up this restaurant. He lived in Boston for a long time prior to that for a while and worked at a Benihana's, which is like another chain, a Japanese steakhouse there. And he decided that he wanted to open up one for himself. So he met a bartender that was working there, which is Joe, which is a long time bartender at Gojo's until he passed this time last year. And they moved to Kansas City because my dad thought that Kansas City was the perfect place for a place that didn't have the hibachi restaurant but also really loves steak. So they thought that Kansas City, out of all the places in the United States, he was in Japan, he's like, I'm gonna go here. So my mom and dad moved here, and shortly after had my older sister, and then a few years later I was born. I mean, we had just been going there throughout our lives. Most of the staff there that are still there or was there have been there since 1978. Wow. So it's just like a whole different home for us. There's probably a group of probably now a little less than 10 of the core people that have been there since the beginning. We all kind of worked there at some point in time. I was a hostess when I was probably too young to be working and just going in and out. And it's just this special place for us that has always been a part of my life. I now have 2 kids and gotten married, and my younger sister has 2 kids, and my older sister also got married. And anytime we're in Kansas City, we'd go and dine there, and my kids were so into the fire. And it was just like this generations of past of people that we've known my entire life, with people that my dad has known longer than, I've been alive, just coming together and sharing the restaurant. So, I mean, things have changed a lot, and as the years have passed, but the food, the atmosphere of the company has always been the same. So we just loved, it's just a huge part of our lives. I don't know how else to say.
Yeah. So when Gojo's announced the closure, I think they put some of the photos from the early days on Facebook, which were really neat to look through. And what struck me looking through those was just how you can kind of feel the celebratory special occasion spirit through all of those, with like whether it's the 2-foot-tall chef toques or the coordinated uniforms or the table decorations. And it seemed like when the closure was announced, a lot of people kind of echoed that, how important that was as a special occasion spot for them to celebrate milestones in their lives. Did the restaurant style change much over the years?
It really hasn't. I mean, people still go there for all sorts of celebrations. One of the things that when we did announce, because I've been working a lot on doing a lot of the social media stuff now, so I've read all the comments and seen so many people share their memories of the restaurant. And I mean, we knew that was definitely happening, but it was so like heartwarming to see, like people said that they got engaged there the night before, and then they carved their name on the wall, and they were asking to see if they could get a picture of that and all that kind of stuff. But it just seemed not surprising, but like we were amazed by how much it meant to other people within the city. So that was like something that we were really surprised about whenever we announced our closure, to see the outpouring of love from the community. And it's sad to have closed.
All right, I want to bring in Chrissy here, as Carrie introduced already, the chef owner of the Filipino restaurant KC Pinoy, which operated in the West Bottoms through September. And I want to note here, Chrissy, that in your bio on the website, you labeled yourself head dishwasher, which I have always admired. And I wondered if you could just take a couple seconds to talk about why you label yourself that way for the organization.
Well, I think any business owner would kind of empathize with that title, because you kind of wear all the hats. And I put the head dishwasher there because I was always a big believer that to be a good team, you have to do everything. You have to share the work so that you can share the love and all the accolades at the end. So, I've always told my staff that if there are plates in the sink, wash them. I don't care if you're the cook or the front of the house or the owner like me, you wash the dishes, because if the dishes don't get washed, they'll just pile on, and then it just goes in the weeds very quickly. So I think every business owner knows that you kind of have to get your hands dirty most of the time, because that's really just how small businesses work. You don't have a plethora of staff to kind of delegate stuff to, and you just do the work, whatever it is. You just have to get it done to kind of keep moving. So that's kind of the ideal of the food truck, the restaurant, the business, really.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, obviously KC Pinoy started as a food truck in 2015. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why you decided to move to a brick and mortar in 2018, and just what that decision and ability to do that meant to you.
Well, the food truck is a seasonal business. So, it really doesn't work too well in the snow. When you are carrying, a literal, 25,000 pound vehicle, doesn't really stop in the ice and snow of the Midwest. So it limits your time to be out and serving. That, and we were renting a commissary kitchen space, and I was just thinking about how it would be nice to have a retail space during the off season where we can still continue serving the food that we serve out of the food truck, and maybe bring out more brick and mortar friendly menu items, because the food truck menu is very limited to portability. You can't really serve a lot of the things that we serve out of the restaurant, the brick and mortar, in the food truck, just because there is no way you can serve, like our sisig on a sizzling plate. It doesn't really transfer to a styrofoam box. Well, so that was one of the motivations. The other one is I wanted to keep my staff working. Unfortunately, when the food truck isn't working, I have to lay my staff off for 3 to 4 months during the winter, and that just opens up to maybe them finding a better job somewhere that's more permanent. So I wanted to keep my staff employed during the off season. So I figured if we can find a space, and we were lucky enough to find a space that kind of spoke to all of us and said, this is a great space, small enough to make it cozy, but big enough, that it might work for us. So that's how we ended up at the West Bottoms.
Okay, great. So I want to ask both of you about kind of the turn as we entered March, and when you kind of realized that business was going to take a hit. And Kyo, I'll start with you here, because I believe Gojo's originally closed early in the pandemic with the idea that the closure was going to be temporary, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I think, there's just a lot of things that kind of happened, obviously, with everybody. We closed whenever there was the mandates to close the restaurants down, that we could do takeout. So then we transitioned to trying to do a takeout business. And we were successful. The phones were ringing off the hooks. There were people outside just super pumped and excited. And there was a lot of excitement around it. However, it was just very difficult for us because we don't actually have a kitchen. The kitchen's the tables. So our kitchen became the dining room. We don't even have Wi-Fi in the building because it's just not like how we've been operated. We've never done takeout before. We've never done anything like Grubhub or Seamless or any Uber Eats or anything that offers meal delivery services. So it would require us to gain all that technology within the building and to train people to figure out how that is and all that kind of stuff. So the takeout business was going pretty well for a while, but then it was just at a point where we just kind of felt things were, getting bad, and we didn't want to have our staff risking anything for their lives. They, as I said before, the core of our staff have been there since 1978, which means the majority of the core people there were in their 60s and 70s. And my dad's there. I didn't want him to be in danger of anything. And these people I've known my entire lives. So it was a heavy decision to kind of close temporarily to see what would happen with COVID and how it would transpire. And obviously it's gotten worse. And things have not been in a place where we felt comfortable reopening, and also not 100% sure whether or not we wanted to really transition into a full takeout business. I know you didn't ask about why we closed or decided to close permanently, but essentially we did because the restaurant itself was at a crux of transition before COVID happened. The building was old, the management is older, so we would have to invest a lot of time and energy and money into revamping the physical space, and also training new employees and management. Like my sister, who's the president of the company, would have to. There was just going to be in the near future a huge transition within the restaurant itself. So COVID kind of just sped everything up, and everything just kind of happened where we felt if the unsurety of what the restaurant industry was going to look like, it just made more sense to focus on what we're going to focus on now, which is the sauce industry, which we know there is a demand for and need for today, and also something that we could manage at this point in time. So, so it was just a mixture of all sorts of things of what kind of happened and transpired before we got to the stage that we are today.
Okay, thank you. And we'll get back to talk about the sauce in a minute here. I'm excited to hear about that. Chrissy, I want to bring you in here. Same question. I mean, what was the turning point for you in deciding to close down the brick and mortar?
August was my barometer, really. So we were lucky enough to get a little bit of the PPP back in April. So we closed on March 19th. So that was like the week the mayor sent out the mandate to either shut down completely or do just takeout. So we shut down to just kind of figure out what the next plans are. There was no way for us to do dine-in because we had a 32-seat restaurant, and for it to be 6 feet apart, we had 2 tables really in our dining room. So it was not sustainable that way.
Right? That wouldn't be profitable to open with 2 tables.
No, I mean, it would be nice. It's very romantic to just have the restaurant to yourself for 2 hours, but it's as a business, it's not sustainable. And then we were able to get some PPP, and then we were able to do some sort of carry out. The good thing is we had the food truck, so we had the kind of the training to do carry out, and we can plate and bag everything very quickly. But once people started losing jobs, it's kind of hard to force or ask people to eat out when it's a matter of a choice between rent or eating at KC Pinoy. That's pretty much an easy decision. So we saw a lot of decreases in our sales in the months after that, after March. And then August was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, as you said. It was, I'm a big numbers person. I run the numbers all the time. That's kind of what drives the business. And we made, when our August numbers came, it was 30% of what we made in 2019, August of 2019. So there was no way just to, even the most optimistic person just looks at that number and you're like, there is no way, there is no way to sustain a business. And it won't be a responsible thing to just keep it going just because you have this fairy tale dream of, oh, I'm gonna keep it going. Just they're gonna come at some point and save us, and I commend everybody who's stuck it out for this long. But unfortunately, for my business, it was self-funded. I did not have any investors. So I didn't have anybody to call and say, hey, can I have another, 20 grand to last us another 2-3 months? I didn't have that. So it was just a matter of the bank account kind of turning smaller and smaller. And then that's when when I decided to shut down in September. So I kind of gave everybody a chance to do, to have a little bit more of KC Pinoy one last time, and then we shut down in September.
Okay. Could you share a little bit about your experience applying and receiving PPP funds? So I'm curious, what the process was like for you, how significant or how much that mattered in terms of being able to hold out a little longer, and if there were any other programs or grants that you applied.
Well, the PPP helped, but I've talked about it to multiple people, but it's kind of like a Band-Aid, like a very small Band-Aid, and you have like a 9-foot gash that you need to like put a Band-Aid on. So the way the PPP works, for those who are not in the industry, but you pretty much do like payroll times 2.5 months. That's kind of the general, standard formula. So for me, I had 2 employees in the restaurant, and luckily I was able to include 2 people out of my food truck last year. But their payroll was not, it wasn't enough to kind of help out in any way with the other operational costs, which is really the higher ones, rent, utilities, food cost. There is no way. I know that there's some talk about letting those costs be forgiven, but my experience with the PPP was that it was very tedious. especially for a small business who, if you're just a single owner, you don't have any help, maybe you're doing your own bookkeeping, it's very hard because you have to submit all these paperwork. And, if you've lost one of those forms, it's very hard to kind of maneuver through all the systems. And I think that's one of the failures of the government, of the federal government, is because the smaller independently owned businesses never got a chance to get the full help of the PPP because we did not have the lawyers and the accountants the big businesses had. I mean, they were in line before the floodgates opened because they knew the bank manager, they had an investment broker that could help them out, fill out the forms. The small businesses don't have that. And at the end of the day, the small businesses kind of had to fight for the scraps at the end, while the bigger businesses were able to kind of get the lion's share of the funds.
That's, I think, an important point. And I want to mention here also that I have spoken to a couple other local restaurant owners who mentioned actually applying for PPP funds and being rejected initially because, as you said, they didn't have kind of people to help them put their applications together and make sure all the I's were dotted and T's crossed. The way that, as you noted, larger companies with more employees and maybe an accounting team could navigate that process a little more smoothly. So I think that's an important point.
And they also don't have, they don't have the relationship with the bank because, they might just have $2,000 in the bank. You don't need a financial advisor for a small business. So the bank manager might not know your name even when they look up your business. They might not even know that you're banking with them. And I think that's the majority of the businesses, at least the small businesses issue.
That's a good point also. Kyo, did Gojo's apply for a PPP loan or any other kind of grants or funding?
I cannot personally say because I don't really know all of, I didn't deal with that. Yoji, who is our manager, I know he applied for it. I believe we got some. And it went to help paying off our employees, which, I think we had like maybe 40 or so at that time to pay them off and like let them have a proper send off. But other than that, and to pay off for whatever overhead and all that kind of stuff, I can't speak to all of the details on that because I didn't do it.
So we're talking on maybe an auspicious day because this is the day that the second round of PPP funding relaunched, which is, I know, something that a lot of restaurant owners who are still trying to scrape by have been waiting for. And the stipulations this time are a little bit more generous. The new program allows funding to be used for outdoor dining and PPE and supplier costs, which is a little bit new, that they weren't explicitly forgivable in the last round. So that's, for any restaurant owners tuning in or other people in the scene, that's hopefully a cause for a tempered Band-Aid optimism, as Chrissy said. So related to that, though, I want to ask both of you, what do you think, and I want to keep this question kind of open-ended, whether it's at the city or state or federal level, what do you think could have been done to better help restaurants like Gojo's and KC Pinoy survive? And Kyo, I'll start with you.
I don't know if I can really properly answer this question because I never really dealt with any of the books or the proper stuff with Gojo's. I'm just, helping out with this new venture that we're going into. From what it sounds like of all the people that I know that are in the restaurant business, it's just, or anyone who needs a stimulus, it just wasn't enough, or that it just didn't come quick enough or fast enough or large enough. So, I really can't speak too much to it. Sorry.
Chrissy, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of things to say. Well, I can't speak for everybody, for the rest of the restaurants, but I think the biggest thing that I wish the government have done is not politicize this pandemic. When public health and public safety becomes a partisan issue, I think that's when we've lost our way. Doesn't need to be, the masks doesn't need to be a Republican or a Democrat issue. I can say personally that when we reopened, we actually reopened our restaurant for dine-in for 3 weeks in July because we were allowed to. So we're like, let's try it. Let's see if we can make some more money. And the number of times I actually had to argue with somebody over putting a mask on, even when there was a city mandate, a county mandate in our area saying that masks are required. When business owners actually have to do the enforcement of it, I mean, that was probably one of the worst times. And, this last few months have been, worse upon worse upon worse. But those 3 weeks were probably one of the worst times as a business owner for me, because I had to see how people actually put over, their selfish kind of reasons over not putting a mask on. Like, for me that really hits hard, because we're out there putting this is a perfect example. I had one customer who said, I can't breathe through my mask if I have to wear a mask on for 20 minutes at the restaurant. I was very candid with her, and I said, ma'am, I wear the mask 12 hours a day in a hot kitchen. So if I can wear it for 12 hours, you can wear it for 30 minutes while you order. And, I told her she had a choice. She can either leave the restaurant, go somewhere else, or sit down and follow the rules. And then, everybody's excuses or argument, I guess, without not saying excuse, but, well, it's not required in the state. It's not a state mandate, so I don't have to put a mask on. And I'm like, well, ma'am, if the health department shows up in my restaurant, they will shut me down if you don't have a mask. So, it's just one of those things where we're already struggling with the pandemic, and then to add politics over it, it's just, for me, that's the failure of the government. When you actually have to create a bigger divide over already a divided country, I think it's just hard to kind of stand behind what our government has done so far. So, and I'm hoping that this is kind of an eye opener for a lot of businesses to kind of see what's going on.
You mentioned that you reopened for dine-in for about 3 weeks. Was the reason that you decided not to continue with that, was that related to this issue with not being able to?
Yeah. Okay. We've had, I've had my staff attacked over it. We've had people throw menus on the floor because they don't want to put a mask on. It's definitely a really bad insight, like a little view inside humanity, this whole pandemic, because it's not a pretty sight. This is not who we are. We could do a lot better.
This is maybe a good opportunity, not to get too preachy, to remind our listeners who are participating in Restaurant Week this week that if you are going out and you are dining in, to wear a mask. Don't make Chrissy or any other business owner or server who's making below minimum wage tell you to follow the rules and to tip generously, understanding that it is a really difficult time out there, and essentially we're subsidizing hazard pay for our restaurant workers who are still out there right now. But thank you for sharing that, Chrissy. So I'm gonna ask a couple more questions. We're gonna hopefully get into some optimistic, more hopeful conversation here in just a minute. But I wanted to remind folks that if you have questions for Chrissy or Kyo, please drop them in the YouTube comments. We'll circle back around to those in just a few minutes here. So please share those on the YouTube link. Okay, so I'm going to ask both of you a question that I think a lot of restaurant owners have been asking lately, which is what do we lose beyond just, quote unquote, a business or a place to eat out when our small independent restaurants close? I guess, Kyo, do you have any thoughts on that? I'll start with you.
Oh, sorry.
A sense of community for sure. We've had a lot of regular customers come in through over the years that knew a lot of our employees. We obviously lost a family within our own community of, having to let everyone go. We have a pretty strong Facebook presence, and people do follow us quite a bit still, and people make comments and things like that. But you know, a Facebook and social media preference isn't quite the same dialogue as you would in a restaurant. So I think the loss of community in the sense of just being, you know, physically there in the space in Kansas City and being around one another is definitely, I mean, the restaurant had 12 tables of 10 to 12 guests sitting in one communal table. And there was a lot of people who met at those places that just chatted or talked or whatever, you know, and there's just none of that anymore, obviously. And it's just kind of sad, the whole, how COVID has just caused us to be a lot more guarded. Like, I don't know when Gojo's or any other hibachi restaurant that has some sort of communal table would feel comfortable, like guests coming back to sit with a bunch of strangers again to talk about nothing and share shrimp being tossed at them. Like, it just doesn't, it just seems like it's such a long time ago when that seemed okay and safe, and who knows when it will feel that way again. So yeah, I would say the loss of community.
I think the bittersweet, well, everything's bittersweet, but one bittersweet aspect of that is just that that's probably, that community kind of meal and dining is probably what people are craving most and will most want to kind of try to get back to if there's a, you know, a post-COVID future, which there will be, but it's sort of hard to see that silver lining right now. Chrissy, what about you?
I think the one thing that we will definitely lose after all these restaurants close is the diversity. You know, small immigrant-owned restaurants, it's kind of a window to somebody else's culture. You know, you don't have to fly a 22-hour flight to Bangkok to have good Thai food, or you don't have to go all the way to Japan to have, you know, a Japanese steakhouse experience. And you don't have to do all that. You can just drive to Gojo's and you can be transported to somebody else's home. And most immigrant businesses, those, you know, it's not just a meal. It's like a passion project. These, you know, these restaurant owners, these cooks, they, you know, they're using recipes from their moms, their grandmothers, their aunts. It's something that, you know, that people put their heart and soul into. It's not just something that you can get out of a Cisco box and throw it in a microwave and say, hey, here's some chicken fingers, enjoy. It's kind of a peek into somebody else's home, really. And the other thing is, you know, not just diversity on the food, but also the diversity in the workforce. I mean, the food industry hires everybody. Like, it's probably the most inclusive industry out there. You know, my staff alone, we have musicians, we have artists, we have LGBTQ. We really, you know, we're a very, at least at our restaurant, we're very inclusive. And I think that's one of the things that you're missing too, is that, you know, you can see someone with purple hair serving you tacos. And that, you know, that doesn't happen at, you know, Crate and Barrel. It's just one of those things that you just miss. You know, you have that diversity that you kind of lose when you go to a small mom and pop shop. And of course, the delicious food. That's really the one thing that you lose.
That's a good point as well, Chrissy, that you spoke to there about how the hospitality industry also supports so many other industries indirectly. I mean, in terms of, you know, like you said, often musicians and artists will work service industry jobs because they're more flexible. So really, the loss of these hospitality jobs is also a loss that's going to be carried over to other industries and other areas of the city's culture that really make it a place, you know, worth living and writing home about. Okay. Well, I hopefully want to wrap up part of this panel on a high note. So I want to talk to both of you about the future. And Kyo, I'll start with you because I know I've read that Gojo is launching some of their sauces. Can you talk a little bit about that endeavor?
Yeah. So it kind of started when we were doing takeout right after the pandemic started and the restaurant was shut down. We were doing takeout, we ordered some food, or people could order like their own rice bowl. It had rice and veggies and meat and then sauce on the side. But then we also started offering the sauces in little containers to go. And I mean, we always had people coming in and trying to buy the yellow sauce to go. and people would come in just to pick up some yellow sauce to go. I guess that would be our first takeout that we had done. But they were buying it in just crazy amounts. They would come in and buy one meal and then ask for like 10 containers of yellow sauce. And we had to put a cap on it because, you know, obviously we can only make so much in a night. So we capped it at 3, and people would be like, oh man, well, I'll just take a teriyaki if I can't have enough yellow or whatever. So we ended up selling quite a bit of sauce during that time. And we put our heads together and realized, sorry, doorbell ring. So then we realized that it was really, could be a sauce business. Like we realized that a lot of the people at the restaurant were coming to dine for that sauce. So we started working with a local manufacturer to start making these sauces to be shelf life sustainable. And I come from a graphic design background, so I did all the graphic design of the labels and everything. So it just kind of worked out. It took a while to get to the process and we're still not fully ready yet to be available in grocery stores, but we are hoping that the sauce will do really well. We had a soft launch that started in the beginning of December, and we were only selling from one particular our manufacturer, who's Spice and Foods, and they sold it at their gift shop and online. And then within 2 weeks, we sold 3,000 bottles of yellow sauce, and about half or 3,000 of both the teriyaki and the miso ginger dressing. So I mean, it was a very successful launch. People were very excited about it. You know, the gift shop were saying they were coming in and buying like cases at a time. Pretty amazing. Like we didn't really expect that kind of reception, which is great. So now we're in a whole new business and industry that we've never been a part of. And it's been really exciting for us to get to be a part of. I've came on a lot to do this type of work for the restaurant. My dad's stepping back and wanting to retire now. So it's been very exciting. We've had a lot of great feedback. We're continuing to move on. We're hoping that we could introduce more lines into the label and brand and become like a grocery line for now. I mean, things are open-ended. We're not exactly sure what it's going to be, but it won't be the same Gojos as it always was. We had to shift and pivot to today's time, and we're just trying to see where that takes us.
Okay, thank you, Kyo. They have a couple audience questions that are about the sauce, so I want to bring those in here before we turn things over to Chrissy. So we have an audience question, which is, will you be offering the green and yellow sauce with several question marks and exclamation points?
The yellow sauce is available. It is actually currently sold out, and we're working on enhancing some of the recipe parts of it. So it's going to be back on the shelves in a couple of weeks, I think, in a few weeks. The teriyaki sauce and the miso ginger dressing are currently available on spiceandfoods.com and also on their gift shop, which is located on Southwest Traffic Way. The green sauce we're not quite there yet with the green sauce. There's a lot of we're learning a lot about food science and learning that food stability has a lot to do with it. We're not sure what we're going to do with that. But that, you know, everything is just in the open. So the yellow sauce will be available, and we're lining up some groceries and distributors to get it. We've had a few people email us saying that they own shops and want to sell it too. So hopefully in the very near future, you will see it in Kansas City grocery stores and stores all around.
Okay. And for those who maybe didn't get a chance to visit the restaurant before the closure, could you talk about what the yellow sauce is so they can, try it?
It's very hard to describe. I would like to know what other people think what the yellow sauce is. It started on our shrimp appetizer that had shrimp and mushrooms. It had the yellow sauce over it with a green sauce. In addition to it, the yellow sauce is a very like savory, tangy, not too sweet. It was essentially an appetizer, lots of like umami flavors that went with that. So it made like a little dish that when you see the fire of Gojo's, that's what they were cooking underneath the fire, was the yellow sauce shrimp appetizer. Over time, people started asking for it on their plates after they finished the food. They wanted to pour it all over their finished meals. So they had steak and veggies, and they just pour yellow sauce over the entire thing, and they'd ask for it to ladle it on in a bowl of rice. And so people have found that you can put it on anything. So it's become a condiment of sorts that adds a lot of like zing, zest, and tang and savory umami at the same time. So it's unlike anything I could probably have ever had. And I think that's why many people are strong followers of it.
Okay. And just to hit I know you said they're sold out, but for the future, if people want to order it, they can go online to, what's the website for the?
spicinfoods.com. We will also soon be available on Amazon and other online venues as well. And hopefully also at grocery stores. So.
Okay. And can people go to the Spice and retail store to purchase it as well?
Yes. Okay. I don't remember the address exactly, but it's on Southwest Traffic Way. Okay,
great. Thanks, Kyo. All right, Chrissy, same question to you. What's next? What's coming up for Chrissy Newcomb?
Well, right now we're just trying to see what the spring would look like. We do have the food truck still, and we do have a lot of people inquiring about private events for 2021, especially weddings for June and October. But we're kind of on a holding pattern right now. We just want to see what the vaccine rollout looks like, and what the infection rates really, to be honest, look like before we kind of plan for a 2021 season. We might be able to have some sort of a food truck schedule by the summer if everything kind of looks as promising as it is sounding right now. But we are on a holding pattern. We're about to launch our online store to do just the frozen items that we've been kind of selling ever since, our frozen empanadas, some desserts, some cakes and pastries, stuff like that. But we're hoping to kind of get the food truck rolling again, get my trucker hat going again, and kind of do what we were doing from the beginning.
Okay. And if people want to kind of monitor the retail store and kind of any other updates, what's the best place for them to do that?
Social media. We try to be as open and honest to everybody on social media on what we're up to. We're definitely not going to have a retail space for a little bit. It's the sting is still there. So there's definitely a lot of lessons learned from opening the brick and mortar. So we're probably gonna have to step back and reevaluate what our priorities are for KC Pinoy. But I'm hopeful to kind of keep it going in some form or another.
Okay. I am going to turn to some audience questions now because we have quite a few. And just a reminder, you can leave those in the YouTube chat and we'll get through as many as we can here. So first question I have here is, certainly the COVID restrictions have been difficult for Kansas City restaurants, but many restaurant owners took steps to protect their staff and diners long before the government mandated those steps. And the questioner wants to know, how do you think the Kansas City restaurant scene in general has done with balancing their need to stay open and their desire to protect their employees and customers? So I'll open that up. Either of you want to jump in there?
I think most of the restaurant owners have done a great job. We've had the good and bad thing about our times right now is social media can really be a tool on those who are not taking the necessary steps to protect the restaurant workers. So I think that's kind of a good check for the industry. I think there's a lot of people who are kind of pushing it a little bit, but at the same time, it's a hard balance. So it's, unless you kind of know everything that's going on in the restaurant, it's very hard to really just have a one yes or no answer to that. But I think for the most part, Kansas City has done well. I mean, it's not 100%, but I probably would give it maybe a B. for Asians, that's really bad.
Yeah, I think it really just depends on each business and who owns it and what their priorities are and how they roll that out. So, I mean, for us, it was really important for the safety of our staff. So we never had dine-in, which made customers upset. But you kind of have to do what's best for you and for your staff. And I'm sure there's places that have, only outdoor seating or aren't following all the rules or, completely shut down because of safety reasons. I mean, everyone has different health, issues and, it's hard. We can't judge. My hope is that the diners understand that everyone has their own stories as well. And they're like, maybe someone has conditions in which COVID is very scary for them. So yeah, I think that it's just really dependent on every single business owner. And it's a hard thing to balance and to figure out what you want to try to do. And on top of that, making the decision for yourself and what's safe and to communicate that message out to your customers and have them receive it well is a whole different story too. So
I think from a diner perspective, I guess I would add that if, staying COVID safe is important to you, I think most restaurant owners who are kind of taking those extra steps are only too willing to talk to you about everything that they're doing to try and keep their staff and customers safe. And so I think if you go to their social media or their websites and you see kind of that information displayed prominently, or if you give them a call, many people don't have websites, but are still, working really hard to keep their staff safe. If you give them a call and ask, that's a great barometer. If you're, most of them who are taking it seriously are just so eager to tell you what they're doing and the steps that they're taking. And I also would say that these COVID restrictions, it's not only the fine dining restaurants that can afford to do this. So I think a lot of people have read about some of these needlepoint ionizing air filtration systems that people are putting in to keep their diners safe. And of course, the concern is always, not every restaurant owner has the ability to do that and to afford that. But there are people all over the city taking really creative measures to keep their diners safe. And so one I would mention, just by way of example, is Gigi's Barbacoa in KCK. They have a really tiny dining room, so they never felt like it was safe to reopen. But what they did was instead they built a plywood hut in front of the restaurant. Yeah, with a window, exactly. So you'll order, you'll never see a face. You'll get a disembodied hand that will hold your carryout out in this plywood. And it's the safest I've felt ordering food in KC. So I guess I would just urge people to keep an open mind about the kinds of restaurants that they patron if they want to stay as safe as possible, and just give them a call and talk about that. And most of them will be all too eager to discuss that with you.
I think patience too is key. Just be patient, because we're all kind of treading through this unknown abyss together. So, there's no reason to, be mean or rude to business owners and employees just because we're all kind of lost right now. So just a little bit extra patience. It goes a long way.
There's a couple questions in the chat also about your former staffs at each restaurant. So a questioner wants to know, have you remained in touch with your former staff, and how hard has this period been on them?
Yeah, we've been lucky enough to have been invited to a few pop-ups since we closed. So my kitchen manager and one of my team, they kind of helped me out during those events. I'll just give them a call and be like, hey, can you help me out? We have this event, or, it's not a lot, but it kind of gets them back in the kitchen. So it's kind of a reunion tour, if I may call it that. But yeah, it's we've stayed in touch just because we're a small team, so we kind of have to just check on each other, especially during these times where, mental health is kind of very, very crucial at the moment. So you kind of have to check in on everybody just to make sure that they're doing okay.
Are there resources that you've seen, whether for mental health or just support groups for restaurant owners or things like that have?
No, not for restaurant owners. We kind of all cope differently. I've been baking, sadly, for my boyfriend. I've been baking really terribly, so that's kind of been my therapy. So it's been you just have to find something really, because if you don't, it kind of just takes you to a dark place, and it's not a pretty place. But yeah, it would be nice to have that, but Kansas City is such a small community, so everybody kind of knows everybody. So if anybody needs help, it's one text away and say, hey, you want to go for a walk and stuff like that. So it's a really nice community to be part of.
Kyo, how about you? Obviously, the staff is also your family. And as you noted, you've had people there that have been there throughout the whole journey with the restaurant. How are they doing?
Some of them are enjoying retirement. My dad being one. Others I know, our actual close friends and family as well. We have a very strong Micronesian group of people that had worked with us. And I know that the management of our restaurant have been in close contact and in touch with all of them. Most of them, I believe, have found other jobs and are moving on and figuring out what to do. So I think we're all just kind of figuring out what the next steps are.
Are any of the former employees helping you with the sauce venture?
Yes. So we have the head chef, Tak, who is a very popular chef there. He created the recipes, so he's still working with us working with a manufacturing company and doing research and development there. We are tapping in on his skills to also potentially open up new lines of sauces and other things there. So he's working there. Yoji, who's our manager, who's always been our bookkeeper and general staff manager, and he's still around and helping out and doing a bunch of stuff and writing checks. And we still have a business, so he has to be a part of that in terms of the numbers and everything for the sauce world.
Okay.
And obviously also, my sister, who is now the president of the company, she's a trained chef and is a huge part of Gojo's before it closed and also now today. So she's creating recipes to use for the sauces that we have now. And right now we're working on a website to put new recipes for home cooks of different ways to use our sauces.
Okay. And we should maybe note here that Kyo, you weren't local before this, right? You were working elsewhere and then came back to work on the sauce project?
Yes. I actually I live in Chicago. So I'm not currently in Kansas City. I lived in Kansas City my entire life. In my adult days, I left. I lived in New York for a long time, moved to Chicago to be closer to family, because it's not New York. It's a little bit closer. It's a 7-hour drive. My husband is from Detroit. So Chicago seemed like a good place for us to be. And I took some time off from my life to raise kids. And then all this stuff kind of happened at the opportune time for me to have the time and ability and capability to do it. And I come from a corporate background. And so understanding all this stuff comes much more naturally to me than it would for a chef like my sister. So team together, we make a great team to essentially now my younger sister and I are in charge of the company in whole. So we are working together to move forward.
Okay, great. Okay, another question from the audience. Kansas City was starting to emerge as a national foodie destination in the year leading up to the pandemic. Is that still something we can accomplish? And how much has that goal been set back? Chrissy, I might direct this one your way first. And I think you're on mute.
Sorry. I think if there's anything restaurant owners and workers really do know how to do is to adapt. So they will come back stronger after this whole mess has been kind of dealt with. But it's definitely a setback. I think, there's a lot of people who will be closed permanently and maybe even take a step back from the industry just because it kind of burned them in a way where A, they might not be financially be able to bounce back, and then B, just the emotional strain of, you know, closing the business, closing like a passion project that you've had for how many years. So it's definitely there's definitely a setback, but I think that as long as Kansas City is willing to invest on, you know, immigrant owned, minority owned businesses, restaurants, you know, they will be back. They will, because there's always a need for good food. I think that's universal. So it will be back. It might look a little differently, but it will be back, I think.
Kyo?
Yeah, I think the barbecue world of Kansas City is not ever going to go away, which I think helps the rest of us kind of get into that too. So the manufacturing company that we do a lot of barbecue sauces, and they are great at what they do and therefore can be great at what they're doing for us. That, you know, I go home to Kansas City a few times a year, and every time I go, we hit up specific restaurants that we want to go to. I bring home bottles of barbecue sauce, and then like everyone now asks me to bring it back to them. So I just don't think that Kansas City, the foodie restaurant scene is necessarily ever really going to go away, because in the end, what we all want is that I would love to just eat at all these great restaurants all the time. And if everything feels good about it, like I think that everyone's just going to crave that, to be out more and be a part of it. So I don't believe it's going away. It might look different, but it'll still be there.
I guess I would just add, I mean, maybe as a cautionary note, as we think about how people can support the scene right now. I mean, as Chrissy pointed out, I mean, immigrant owned, minority owned businesses and independent restaurants are often some of the first to close. And when we think about rebuilding the city, we have to think about, you know, are we making it easy for them to reopen, and for new restaurateurs to enter the scene who may not have access either to, you know, strong banking relationships and lending, but as also, you know, investor capital and money, which often goes to people who can afford to make a splash, and it often goes to, you know, white business owners who are already established in the community. So I think this is really a place where voting with our dollar right now can make a difference in terms of helping the places that you really love, that help the city reflect the people that live in it, stay open, and thinking about robust public policy that can help those restaurants open and stay, you know, profitable into the future. We're almost out of time. The last audience question is a comment, but, you know, it's actually a good comment. It's not one of those, not really a comment, but a question one. So I want to end on this note. This person says, hi, no question per se, but I wanted to say how much I, and I know so many others, appreciate restaurateurs who are, you know, trying to stay open or struggling at this time, or just dealing with the public in such a trying time. Good luck to both of you. Well, good luck to both of you on your future ventures. And thank you both so much for spending the time to kind of talk about your experiences here. Excited to get some of the yellow sauce. And Chrissy, I'll be looking for what KC Pinoy is doing the rest of the year. Thank you all. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much.